All right, and we are live.
Hi. Hi, everybody, and welcome to H&R Studio's second online discussion, The Figure in Florida, featuring Carlos Martinez León and Teresa Jessurum Uribe, joining us tonight from Miami. Thanks so much for being here. I just want to cover a couple quick housekeeping tidbits before we get started. First of all, our internet connection is a little bit unreliable right now. There's actually some huge wildfires going on not too far from here. So if you start experiencing a lot of tech issues, don't worry about sticking around. We will simply record this and then upload it at a later date, given the literal nature of what's going on so close by the studio. Our apologies in advance for that, and we'll do our best to keep you updated if and when we upload that recording later. The second thing is that before we get started, I get a little nervous doing this, so I wrote it all down and put a bunch of notes on it. So pardon me while I read from my paper a little bit. Even though that was a little bit of bad news preceding this, the good news is that even after coronavirus, we are going to continue this panel series. It's a lot of fun. It gives us an excuse to talk to really, really awesome people regardless of location. That being said, we are actively looking for sponsors, but not in a traditional format. We're interested in working with other small businesses. So for example, if you're a brewery, you don't necessarily have to donate money to us, but rather just trade us a couple beers and we'll enthusiastically mention you during this panel series. So it's a simple barter in which we as a small business can support other small businesses, especially during this time. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a discussion from 7 to 8 p.m. From 8 to 8:30, the floor will open for questions. Again, depending on our internet connection, if we're here, simply ask your questions via chat. If not, I'm sure once the conversation gets rolling, I'll have plenty of questions myself to ask Carlos and Teresa. They're really great. And that brings us to Carlos and Teresa, joining us from Miami to discuss how the figure and contemporary representational art as well is created, taught, promoted, and celebrated here in one of the most populous, diverse, and prior to COVID-19, economically booming parts of the United States. So Carlos and Teresa are part of the newly established Miami International Fine Arts, or MIFA. MIFA is not simply an art school or an art center, but actually I would say a really comprehensive and very exciting visual arts hub that integrates other aspects of our culture into its programming as well, including music, performances, and exhibitions. Teresa is MIFA's president, and Carlos is MIFA's parallel education director. As such, they're the very spear tip advocating for and instructing the figure here in Florida. So with that being said, I would like to cut to Carlos and Teresa and ask them to please say a little bit about themselves so that you guys can get to know them a little bit better too. All right. Carlos, you want to go first?
Hello. Well, ladies first. Teresa, you should begin.
Thank you, Carlos. I was hoping that you would do it first. Okay. Hi, everybody. We are very excited to be here. Thank you very much, Lorraine, for the invitation.
Oh, of course.
My name is Teresa Jessurum Uribe. You pronounce it really good, Lorraine, by the way.
Oh, good.
So we started this Miami Fine Art Academy this year. We're not even a year old. We'll be a year old soon. Mm-hmm. With the idea of helping, to develop artists in the figurative arts. Mm-hmm. And the way we got into that is because I've been on the entrepreneurial world for most of my life. But I'm an artist at heart, so I always wanted to paint. And then I didn't find a very good school in Miami or nothing like this existed. So I had to travel, go to Florence and do workshops and then get private classes with a couple of teachers here and there. And then one day when I met accidentally Elkin and Melissa, I was, this is what I was looking for. This is great. And that was like 3 years ago. And then I started studying with them. And eventually the idea came out of making a comprehensive academy, a nice school where, we could open to, to people that was like me, like looking for better to learn in the backyard of my house, right? Without having to travel to Europe. And Melissa have a very solid background. They studied also Carlos studied, he will tell you about himself, but they all studied in Florence with very skilled teachers. And when I started to learn with them, I was like, this is what I needed. This is, thank goodness. I mean, I kind of, I was so excited. And I've been excited since the last 3 years and trying to do something better with them. And then we came up with this idea of, putting our resources together and building this MIFA, which is Miami International Fine Arts. Okay, Carlos, sure.
Okay, well, my name is Carlos Martínez León. I'm from Venezuela. And as Teresa said it before, I studied in Florence Academy of Art from 2007 till 2010, where I graduated. I taught there for a year as a student teacher and then went back to Venezuela to continue developing a little bit as a painter. So in 2013, I received a call from Elkin and Melissa to come here and join them in the foundation of an academy who last year transformed in Miami International Fine Arts. So briefly, the story has brought us together, all of us, in less than a year. So it has been really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And also, just so you guys know, I neglected to say, Brett's not just a, Brett is doing the tech for this.
Yeah. So,
really
I'm doing double duty tonight. I'm going to try to contribute to the conversation a little bit. But I am also here trying to monitor our YouTube stream and manage our broadcasting software. So, thank you for the introduction, Lauren. I appreciate it.
And we've also gotten to know you guys better because Brett's been working with you guys regarding the sculpture aspect of MIFA Miami. So, disclaimer, I'm already very personally biased towards you guys. So, everybody should probably be aware of that. But actually, I would love to bring this conversation right back to MIFA itself. And I was wondering, Carlos and Teresa, if you guys could talk a little bit about the exhibition MIFA hosted this past winter called Rhythmical Brushstrokes, which actually highlighted the figure in Florida itself. And I would love to hear why you guys thought that show was a success.
Carlos, you want to say something?
Okay, Rhythmical Brushstrokes was an idea to bring figurative art to Florida, but judging that we have seen figurative art here, but we haven't seen a group of figurative artists together in a big show. So the idea was to do this first exhibition as something that we could repeat every year and bring a group of selected figurative artists to represent what we believe this type of painting and sculpture, because Brett was too, we had sculptures too, should represent. And it started with a group of 30 people. Now for this year, I don't know how that will change, but the idea would be to continue promoting this type of activities and bring all the artists of all the figurative artists together to form a group and to bring this movement to the surface, in at least in what in shows in Florida should represent.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a great show, and it was really fun to start to get involved with you all because it, the I feel like so much in the world now is becoming um, um, universal, and it doesn't matter where you are. And the art world is kind of the last one of the last things to really totally embrace this sort of universal, borderless way of working. I think a lot of things are, because we're dealing with physical objects and experiencing our work in person. It's been slow to jump on the sort of digital bandwagon, so to speak. And I think that what we're doing, trying to launch some of those ideas from Miami, is really exciting, because it doesn't matter what city you're in. We can all be equally relevant in the same conversation.
But that being said, the thing that impressed me so much about you guys' work, Teresa, is that, and maybe you can speak to the amount of artists you had in the show just from Florida. I mean, it was like Carlos, you said something like 30 artists. So even though Brett was speaking about art now really not having as many borders, I think that show proved that there is such a great community of figurative art now growing in Florida.
I think there is. There's it was like 30 artists, and everybody was like presenting 2 or 3 hours, I think. But the show, I think, was a success. I mean, for us, we were very nervous. It was our first show ever, and the opening night was overwhelming. So many people. So it gave us a lot of faith on the future of figurative art in Florida. People loved what they were looking at. People like it. I mean, yes, I mean, there is, it's hard because normally Miami has been traditionally very focused on more, abstract and other type of art. So, but this show had such a, such a good perception that our hopes inflated. I mean, so people like it, people love it, people feel related to what we were showing, and that's the of it.
Do you think that kind of exhibition, that figurative art, is needed even more because art in Florida is ubiquitous with Art Week in Miami and Art Basel, and you think of these sun-drenched huge Florida homes with big bright abstract paintings. Would you say that the need for something beyond that is part of why the figurative art community seems to be so strong here?
It's growing. Carlos can tell comfortably what I'm saying. I think that the community of figurative art is growing very fast. We all around America, I mean, we see so many really good figurative artists. It's coming like it's coming back. It's like a new renaissance, It's like there's more and more interest. Like Art Basel many years ago didn't have any, very few figurative art. And every year there's a little bit more and more and more. So every year there's more interest. And in Miami, what MIFA wants to do in Miami is to be, it's to be the focus of that, to be part of this movement, to be the central. Okay, not if we want to be the central, we want to be like the central part of what's cooking, and what's cooking is the figurative art, and we want to teach it. We want to tell, grow artists so they can continue the movement.
It's very cool. Carlos, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking the interest in figurative art is growing naturally worldwide. If I think probably 20 years ago, we didn't see too much academies around the world, but now we could probably see hundreds probably. And that interest is growing in younger and younger generations to learn to draw and paint and be trained classically well. And the result is amazing because you get to see really young students learning the craft. And I believe that in probably 20 years, we will be seeing great art masters, great sculptors, great painters. We have today. We have today. But imagine just putting someone to learn this craft at 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, at 20, they will be the new masters of our generation. So, so I believe there's a natural interest in figurative art, and it's slowly showing in the art fairs, and that's very important because art fairs is basically what moves the economy in terms of painting and sculpture. And every year I get to see a little bit more figurative art in each art fair. So it's interesting to see that growing interest is getting to different cities now. It's not only probably in New York, but it's going to Miami, it's going to the main cities that support art. I've heard many good things in art fairs in Peru, in Brazil, in Colombia, that have more figurative tradition in art. So I think we will be seeing a lot of figurative art in the future.
That's awesome. And especially, again, being in Florida, having access to a city like Miami, where you guys are helping it become an epicenter, and then you have access to these fairs, so you can kind of stay fluent in all these languages all at once. And that leads me to the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about tonight, which was when it comes to the figurative art scene in Florida, I think, we have a little more spice. We have a very, very large Hispanic and Latino community in Florida that you might not see unless you're in certain parts of Texas or California. And so I was wondering how you think that influence shapes the figurative art community here as opposed to maybe a figurative art community in Ohio or Seattle, for example.
Well, I think you can see in Teresa's bag, the paintings that she does are full of color, and color is representative of Hispanic people. I think not only color, but there are many different aspects that Latin communities could bring into figurative art that have probably developed a lot in contemporary art movements. But if we see a little bit, for example, Elkin was in a show in Mexico a few months ago. Elkin is the academic director of Miami International Fine Arts. And it was full of great figurative artists from Colombia. So the movement is growing, and it's growing with different particularities that stands out. The subject matter, the social reality that each painter is depicting is reflecting something that could probably be slightly different from other communities. And probably our big idea is just to be the platform to bring this knowledge to these communities to see what we could probably build in the future.
Also, Lorraine, the Latin, what we as Latinos, what we contribute is, our experiences, where we live, even if we are now living in the States, all the, all our past history that we bring from our own countries that is in depth in our personality, in our, of course, in our activity, which will show, and then there's this. For example, I concentrated right now. I'm working on body of work of my what we call palinqueras, which are they are ladies of African. They are descendants from African, slavery times back in the past when Cartagena was the main center for slavery. That's where the ships came with all these slaves, and that's where the ships left with all the treasures from the New World. So it's rich in history, and I was always captivated by these ladies that continue to sell fruits in the streets of Cartagena, which now is a very, very touristic city. But they still living still like kind of in the past, kind of, because they still are they live with the scarcity. They live day by day. They suffer. They have a very harsh life, and the same way that I'm expressing my background, my heritage. All these Latinos in the community, they will express theirs, and that's why we think that Miami will be such a rich epicenter, like you said, Lorraine, for express all this, and being Miami such an open city, open to all these other cities in South America. We think the figurative art in Latin America will grow. Miami will be a very special part of that.
Yeah. So Miami's going to be a huge conduit, kind of essentially from Central and South America up to the rest of the United States. And it's really interesting because I've noticed amongst quite a few figurative artists who are Hispanic, a lot more symbolism in the work. And I think it's, again, Teresa, what you were talking about with, you have all these cultural layers in the Caribbean and Central America and South America. You have people coming from Europe, from Africa. You have different religions coming from those areas. People had to hybridize things. You have, what my abuela calls a sincretismo. You have all these different layers, and it's really interesting how, and I see it a lot too in Elkin and Melissa's work, you have a lot of symbolism. And I wonder too if that's concurrent with the very, very diverse culture that has happened over hundreds of years just in Central and South America and the Caribbean too. So to me, it's really interesting to look at.
Yeah, I think that the way cultures mix is a really exciting thing, and that's one of the things that we loved about living in Queens when we were there, and that's something that we really love about Florida. There's a really interesting mix of different cultures coming together, and I think that does give us an edge. It gives us a chance to do something new and exciting, and I do think that. I do think that people will be, talking about, what we're doing here.
And that leads me to something I wanted to ask you guys. One of the reasons why I'm very grateful for the figurative art community in Florida is because, and I mean, viewers can see it with you guys' work and the work that comes out of MIFA, is it makes you stop and pause and think and react, which is a little bit of a departure from some, excluding the art fairs. Some of the artwork you would have seen in Florida before is what I call, like tourist art. You see a lot of, like studies of the beach, umbrellas, things like that might be a lot more, I don't want to say disposable, but are made just for commercial purposes. I know here on the west coast of Florida, you see a very, very big difference between work that just might have maybe a little more premeditation versus work that's made for a very transient tourist market comprised of people who come down here for a month or two and then they go back somewhere else. Do you guys see that difference on the East Coast as much?
It is for sure something that is changing. I believe Miami is a really young city,
Yeah.
not probably older than 100 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see in this type of painting, of course, is something that could appear commercial, but with these new figurative art waves that are coming, you get to see that this thought of what commerciality should mean is translating into something deeper, and you see that in Wynwood, in the walls, in the graffitis, and that's slowly permeating into the life of different painters, and you get to see works of really interesting figurative artists that are leading here the movement, and it's something that I would think that it will always be there, but you will see a huge difference in the depth of those layers that you just described as the cultural parts that the Latin artist will bring into the painting.
Very cool.
I think lately, or I don't know, I don't know if I should say lately, but I've been seeing like a lot of a tendency going deeper into the object of why you make this art, or so at MIFA, for example, we just don't want to teach somebody to paint. We want this person to think what is the meaning, why is he doing art. I mean, normally go to an academy, you study for years and you learn all the technical aspects, right? And then you come out of it and, okay, so let's think what I'm going to do with these 4 years of technical knowledge that I have.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I noticed differently about my own instruction when I started receiving it from Elkin and Carlos and Melissa is that they take you deeper, I mean, into what is the real reason why you are making this, and how can you take it to another level. And in general, I see this movement like, okay, it's a beach, but maybe there's something in there that I want to express, or I think in general, this is a good art today, or what is called contemporary is like saying, okay, I'm doing this, but I'm doing this for a reason, and I want to something, and we are being we are kind of getting more expressive. That's my feeling.
Yeah. You guys are ahead of us a little bit in terms of that, because I think there's a lot of beautiful landscapes in Florida to depict, but here on the West Coast, you see a lot that are quickly made and almost sold like postcards, again, for a specific audience, as opposed to maybe dwelling or reacting to something. So that's really interesting to know the difference between the East and the West Coast of Florida in that regard. And that kind of, makes me wonder for you guys, again, talking about populations that are down here for a short amount of time and then they go somewhere else. How, I know, again, we feel that very sharply on the West Coast. Usually we have our season from January to May, and then everything is very, very quiet after that. And that definitely affects our teaching schedule here at H&R Studio. That affects everything about how we plan out our year, our budget, what kind of projects we can take on. The population, at least for us in Naples, drops by about half. It's pretty stark. Right now, I'm not really sure what's happening, because with coronavirus, it seems like a lot of people are planning on staying later into the summer or coming back earlier, because the heat and the humidity is so effective against the virus. But I was wondering, again, given how much that impacts our studio here, do you guys feel that seasonal change as much teaching at MIFA in Miami?
Carlos, you want to? Because you are an instructor.
Yeah, it always has been like kind of steady. It affects us a lot when hurricane season begins.
Yeah.
If a hurricane
Makes sense.
impacts Miami, it will affect, of course, the flow of students that naturally we will have in the studio. But this is a new situation without precedent, so I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we are, as we talked before, reinventing ourselves to the online platforms, just trying to bring people value in their homes, just trying to bring them the best that we can give them from the distance. So the idea would be for now, just continue understanding this new world that we're living in, and then rethink what's going to happen when we go back and see how the flow of students will begin. And I believe painting, it should always have someone, you should always have someone by your side. Like the human component of teaching art is something that is really important for everybody, not only for painters. And there's some limitations in teaching via online, but we are just trying to understand how this will for sure change our lives.
Yeah.
And I think it changed a lot. I think before the coronavirus, we were talking about doing some YouTube videos, this and that. We never had the time. There's always this, that.
Oh, us too. Same exact.
Yeah, so we were always planning to do this, to do an interview, to do a presentation, blah, 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 blah. Nothing happened because no time. And then suddenly this coronavirus, and it's forcing us to reinvent ourselves. And I think something very, very positive is going to come out of this. Because first of all, many students are realizing that, okay, there's nothing compared to have the teacher right there in person, but you can still learn something, you know, by video, by... The other day I was watching Elkin show a student. Elkin was doing some corrections and he was using Photoshop to do some corrections in the drawing. And when I saw that, I said, wow, this is even more, this is even, you know, more clear. This is even better than when he explains, because he goes over your drawing and tells you, and then he moves the eyes or he moves these to let you know how you're, you know, how you are displacing the features or something. And I discovered that Photoshop can be really a very, very good training tool. So we discovered these things. We never use Photoshop when, you know, when we're physically in the studio or whatever, but when they show you right there what you got wrong, you know, how to correct it, it's like, boom, so there's ways to learn. There's different ways to learn, and that's where we have to take advantage of. Right. And we are all gonna come back from this better prepared. And all these students, at the beginning, there were many students that were saying, no, it's impossible, I don't want to lesson, you know. And then slowly, they started taking half an hour, 1 hour, and now they are happy with them. I mean, Eki is busy the whole week giving a lesson. So I think it's great. It's something that we didn't have before.
That's great. Oh God, anybody who has work right now, that's awesome. That's really, really wonderful. But yeah, we're wondering if what this will do is kind of mitigate the slowness of the seasonal differences down here. Now that people see, oh, we can do things remotely online, even if they're back up in their you know, wherever they're from up north, especially for hurricane season, you know, maybe now they will realize that they can still get some art instruction from us, or at least some interaction and feedback, even if we can't be there in person. So that makes me wonder, I guess, I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more about what you guys have been doing at MIFA in light of coronavirus. Talk a little bit more about the online programs you guys, I mean, I see you guys doing like color mixing, art history, it seems like you guys have a really, really well-rounded curriculum available online right now.
Well, the first week of the quarantine was really confusing because we had to rethink the things that we could probably bring to the people to bring value to them. I think that's what social media has been about these last 2 months. It's just content creators trying to bring something to the people that would make them feel happy. And one of the ideas was to design a series of lectures and a series of online practices so they could probably learn different aspects of painting while they were home. Because one of the things that Teresa said before is that we are trying to get deeper into the emotional aspects of drawing and painting, and we are trying to get deeper in the art history lessons in those little aspects. They will always be from our points of view, from our experiences. But the idea is just to keep them open, and we are doing this open to public, so as many people can probably share their experiences with us and create a bigger community so we can share ideas of these type of painters. And in the technical aspect, we are trying to focus ourselves in things that the student can probably practice in their home without the least amount of difficulty possible, because we know for the fact that learning to draw or paint is already difficult and it's frustrating in some points, in some cases, depending on the level of difficulty that you will teach. But keeping them or keeping the people just going back some those basic principles is something that has for us been really useful at this time.
Makes sense. Teresa, what do you think about MIFA's online offerings?
About what, sorry?
About all of MIFA's online offerings. How has it been for you as the president of MIFA to lead through in this development?
Okay, our expectation was not to make, any really, it depends on the expectation you have. Our expectation wasn't to make any money. What we wanted is to have our students engaged. We didn't want them to forget that, that MIFA existed, because then after the pandemic finished, maybe people get lazy, they are not used to painting, or, and it's going to be hard to get them back to classes. So we figure, okay, for now, let's just try to keep them, engaged. And I think it's been, I think it surpassed my expectation, because people seem to love it. And they appreciate the fact that we're not charging anything. We just want them to, to be, we just want to create maybe a broader audience for MIFA. And at this point, that's all we can do. But we're also, it's been like a learning process for us. We are practicing with our students. So when Ed started these workshops with color, he had never given this by internet or something. So it has been a valuable experience for us. And the students were like our experiments. And they loved it, they liked it, and it gave us motivation to keep doing more. And then the classes that Carlos is giving every week, he talks about an artist, and we get messages from people saying, "I want to join you, please." So we put them. It's another contact we have in our building. We're not charging anything, but we have another contact, and our contact is growing because people like this lecture. You know, people like everything as long as it's free. So, but I think they're also enjoying it. I think that they are very interested because the focus we're giving them is a very personal focus. Like when Carlos talked about Sorolla, he talked about his visit to the museum, his personal feelings about it, personal impression. So it's more than just going to Wikipedia and find Sorolla.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, content. So people are liking it, and I think even after pandemic, I think we should continue doing this, just to get more out, keep the community engaged.
Yeah.
I think it's been really good.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense because the thing we noticed when we came down to Florida and opened H&R Studio was that we had to be really flexible. We had to be very, very adaptable to any, again, especially with the population here that, is not like this year round, but doing this, we had to be able to make sure that anything we offer can kind of maneuver around the schedule and changing needs of a student base. So again, I think what you guys are doing online is phenomenal because it's the ultimate in flexibility. It's incredibly flexible. And I've been very happy too to notice that our mailing list has grown a little bit more during this time than it ever has before. So thank God.
We'll come back after this.
Yeah. And so that kind of leads me to ask you guys about, what are, where you, a little bit about the future, really, where you guys plan on. I'm looking at I told you I have to write all this stuff down to prepare to get an idea of what I'm doing. So, I was just wondering, do you think, you'd mentioned, Teresa, that you guys want to continue this post-coronavirus. Do you guys have any other plans in the future? Can you tell us a little bit more about, the online offerings you'll have, at least this upcoming summer?
Yes, well, we have some dreams, we have some plans, and all this is a learning experience. What we're doing now is an experiment, and we want to launch a drawing program. And when we talk about drawing by internet, it's kind of difficult, right? But we have several projects, and one of them is a drawing program. And we want to find a way to make it accessible to people that cannot come to Miami to learn.
Yeah.
So we're thinking this all our experience at this moment will, definitely help to launch some such programs. One of them is drawing, for sure, that I know that is something very needed. I mean, I guess you're not a figurative painter until you learn how to draw. So that's very fundamental, right?
Yeah.
And we need to think about a way to teach it without having the person beside you.
Yeah.
And we have to be creative about that. So we're thinking about that program. We're thinking to expand to these kind of programs to people that cannot just come to Miami. So this is the value of this time, this coronavirus time. This is the value that it will leave us, this thinking about launching this kind of programs. Carlos, if you have something to add, what are the things that we've been talking about doing later?
The ideas, as Teresa said, are going through, trying to understand how to go on with drawing programs online. We are trying to see how effective they can be depending on the way that we will be teaching. Another thing that we'll do is that we will be doing Spanish directed lectures to a different audience. So far, we have been teaching everything in English, but we will try to start bringing a Hispanic community with Spanish-speaking lectures and classes.
Oh, that's great.
So we can grow our community a little bit bigger with towards this goal of creating a figurative art movement that brings a little bit of the Hispanic community.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
It hadn't occurred to me that it would help, especially in a state like Florida, where so much of the population is bilingual. You know, you
Yes.
think about it, it's impressive that you guys are in Miami and have been doing anything in English, given what Miami's like. That's wonderful. That's really, really wonderful. So would you guys say that a lot of the people you've had turning in are more local or maybe from outside the Miami area?
Well, they come from a little bit of, they come from Miami, from West Palm Beach, from Boca Raton. So we have a little bit of a mixture. Most of our audience is Spanish speaking, but as we live here, everybody's bilingual. So depending on the student, we can talk English or Spanish. And the idea is just to de-education, to divide the education and just get the English speaking community and Spanish speaking community together in this project.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I wouldn't think, you know, again, kind of going back to the topic of the figure in Florida, that aside from certain communities in Texas and California, that there aren't a lot of programs that can offer what you just described. So you guys, that's really great that you guys are able to do that in Miami and provide that service for a population that's really shaping the whole of the United States, much less just
There is
Florida.
a program like this in Latin America. There is not. I mean, we have a lot of academies in Europe, but for somebody that's in Latin America, in any country, it's difficult to get this instruction, this type of teaching. So that's also in our plans. I mean, to reach all this population from Latin America, that they need a place to learn. They need to. Without going to and spend a lot of fortune going to Florence or Italy.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense we could be a very, very extremely good alternative.
Yeah. And that, again, that kind of goes back to, you know, Florida being, and Miami, especially within Florida, being a conduit, you know, from the Caribbean, Central America, South America, all of Latin America, you know, would expose those people then to more artwork going on in the United States. It would expose more people in North America to artwork happening there. So it really, you know, Florida is geographically and culturally positioned to be a really, really important kind of bridge between the two. So, and that to me is very exciting, because you think of that sort of bridge and you think of places more like New York City. And I think, you know, coronavirus, if anything, is going to see maybe a bit of a small exodus of people away from areas like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, you know, typically the American big three, and you know, not just coming to smaller cities in Florida, but also, again, making Miami more of a necessary epicenter for all of this.
No, it's not easy, because traditionally Miami is not, like when starting anything new, nothing is so easy, and you don't have to start in your studio, and it's hard to get the students interested in figurative art, and especially Miami traditionally has been an area, you know, people like modern, abstract, so it's hard at the beginning, but we have had people that come and say, "Oh, I want to paint abstract. I want you to teach me abstract." Okay, and they go around the studio and they look at all these paintings and they go, "Wow, I would love to paint that." Yeah, but you say you want it abstract. So it's a matter of, you know, it's just a matter of time because it's the challenge is, you know, the culture. The people are not thinking about. People don't want to spend the time. Let's if we are honest, I mean, if you want to do figurative, there's a learning curve. You have to learn this composition. You have to learn this. You have value, colors, etc., etc. So maybe people don't want to go through that issue. But even if you want to be an abstract painter, you should go through all these issues.
Oh, yeah, it would be stronger.
Abstract painting, if you go through all this composition, and this is the message we want to give people. I mean, it's not, you don't have to be, you come to MIFA, you don't have to be a figurative art, but learn about your drawing, learn about your composition, and then do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Well,
Then do whatever you want, but learn the basics. Just
Exactly.
So the challenge is to to convince people to go through this learning curve.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you learn how to make figurative art, you start to be able to intuit the sorts of patterns that we respond to as human beings. So we evolved in nature, and there's a certain there are certain patterns that govern how human beings are put together and how we're formed, and I think oftentimes those are what we consider to be beautiful. And so even if that same sort of pattern is applied onto something that's abstract, I think that we're still going to intuit some sense of beauty from that. And I think that's that's my best argument for why it's important to at least try to learn a little bit of figurative art, because you want to understand what it is that we're responding to as a human being when we look at something that's supposed to be a visual language. You have to kind of start with our own visual language as human beings and start to understand what we respond to. And that lends you some really powerful tools when you're making something that is not representational.
And that's we have very much the same philosophy in that. I mean, you guys know my work is very tight, and when I was in school and people would say loosen up, it was like, no, I want to, so like, for example, if I work with someone who likes to be very loose and expressive, they can be as loose and expressive as they want. They can, the main thing is teaching the foundation so that when they build the house on top of it, no matter what the house looks like, it's got a solid base upon which it stands. And I think, again, that's something that I find especially necessary in Florida, because the population here is so diverse. At least prior to coronavirus, we lead the country in terms of economic growth and projected economic growth. The mix of people we get down here is so incredibly distinctive, not just by the personal individual, personality that everybody has that, lends their own specific hand to whatever artwork they make, but what they need from us. Again, going back to adaptability. We came down here and we had a very set curriculum. Like at this week we do this, at this week we do this, people sign up for this much time ahead of time, the whole thing. And we ended up having to scrap a lot of it because, people are like, well, I'm only in Naples for 2 months. I'm only down here for 3 months in the winter. My grandkids are coming to visit, so I can go 1 week, but I have to skip the next week. So how do you maintain a coherent, cohesive class in building a foundation when, again, the traffic flow here is more like this as opposed to like this. That's one of the things that makes me excited about Florida. I love the growth. I love that everything is new. I love that we can be, part of a wave, as it starts cresting and as it's growing and building momentum, as opposed to, in some other large urban areas. Again, why we left New York is we felt the wave had already, was kind of subsiding, or at least it was a very expensive wave. So, for me, I see the future here in Florida and other areas like Nevada, Arizona, certain parts of Texas, and I just see such unlimited potential. And it makes me actually far more excited to make and teach art here than at any time we were in New York for that reason.
Right.
That was a long thing.
Actually, that diversity that you mentioned in Florida made me, kind of design a program that was more adapted to this diversity, because you see, we're not in Europe, like people spend 4 years in an academy, only art. There's nobody here has that time.
Yeah,
nobody,
exactly.
So we have these issues. We don't have a student that will have 4 years of his life only to come to the academy and paint. Everybody's working, everybody, they come. And we're lucky if the student comes 3 days a week or 2 days a week. I mean, because they are doing some other things. So we don't have this kind of public that, they can come and study with us full time for 4 years. So we had to make a lot of adaptations to the program. Same program, same values, same basic subjents, but more adapted, more flexible, faster. For example, Carlos will bring forth a little bit of that because he studied in Florence, but if in Florence you had to do, I don't know how many, 10 casts, we're only doing maybe 2 or 3 because nobody has time to make 10 casts. But we're teaching the values in every cast. So it's, we have to change the whole approach. And also a lot more, also to be more open to other styles, I mean, to other types of, it doesn't have to be like the classical all masters approach. We don't want to be to force anybody to do classical all masters approach. We want to give the basis so people can do whatever, later do whatever they want. So this is a different mentality, and I want Carlos to expand more on that.
Yeah, I think the key for the success is basically to be flexible, because you experienced that before, and what Teresa said is true. When we started this project 5 years ago, we wanted to apply this curriculum that we studied in Florence, and that doesn't work with the Florida community. I don't know if New York it's the same, but the needs of the American people are completely different from the ones that go to Italy to study.
Yeah.
So the reality, it changes. So we need to continue to ask ourselves why or how is the best way to bring the highest level of education possible to a different community with different dynamics. And I believe that has been the greater challenge for us here in Florida, and probably the most exciting one too, because we need to reinvent ourselves every time, every month, so we can understand how to bring these core principles of drawing, painting, sculpture to a student in different approaches. So I guess at NIFA, we will be experimenting a little bit in those aspects, but keeping in mind that the core values of a painter, the core values of sculpture will be there.
Yes, but not negotiating on that. I mean, you said that non-negotiable. There are things that are non-negotiable, but we have to be flexible in many other aspects. So if we want to, if we want to succeed. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a great note to end the discussion on. I guess now for those who have stuck with us throughout this feed, we may have had a bit of a lag, but we haven't had to, end it for people just yet. If anyone has a question, please feel free to type it in the chat function of YouTube. Brett, is there a lag on this particular video sometimes?
Yes, we have about a 30-second delay. So the image that everyone else is getting, the audio that they're getting, is about 30 seconds behind what's happening right this moment as you and I are speaking. So we are in that kind of awkward time where we've asked for questions, and it's going to take a minute for folks to get those in. I do fear that we have a few less viewers than we might have had due to our internet issues at the beginning, which I'm assuming are coming from the forest fire, which is down the street. But our connection has come back and it's looking pretty good. So, and there are a handful of people watching. So,
and we are going to just keep this up on our YouTube, so anyone can go back at any later date and access it. So these things we don't pull from the YouTube channel. But I guess while we're waiting for maybe a couple questions to come through, I think I have a question for each of you. Again, you know, I have this. So I guess my question for you guys is, what do you think? I mean, we've covered a lot of things about, you know, Florida's diversity, especially its connection, the fact that Florida's foundation really in a lot of ways is the Hispanic community, how these things shape figurative art, you know, the fact that we have these art fairs here. But aside from those things, what is one advantage that you think Florida may have over a lot of other areas in terms of fostering a more figurative or representational art community? That was a big question.
I think our first advantage is that we will be the pioneers. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's difficult because there are some people doing it, but you know, we want to do it as a movement. We want to take it farther. But there's advantages because the diversity, what we mentioned before, and we are open to all types of cultures, and these are these, you know, backgrounds of the artists that have different experiences in their homelands. I mean, they are significant. They are enriching all the scenery. You know, they are enriching all the Florida, let's say, figurative art scenery, because we all come from different backgrounds, different experience, you know, and normally these people that come to Miami, to the States, or these immigrants, normally they have had an experience of a difficult life most of the time. So that mottos that give us like a different approach, and probably helps our art to make it a little bit deeper. All this, you know, because most of the people that are here, they are here because they didn't have it easy on their countries. So something that they can put into their work that reflects that. Carlos.
Well, I think probably the biggest advantage, we are inserting ourselves in contemporary scene in terms of art.
That's big.
So being in Miami, where you see Art Basel and all these art fairs, it will teach us a lot on how to find our own identity as an institution. And our own voice as an artist, because we all will be going through these experiences with different art movements, and that will at the end enrich ourselves, not only and also as professionals. Because that environment in which we live will tend to shape a bit the way that we see things, and probably bring together the distance between contemporary art movements and figurative art movements. And I believe for sure it will be something to see in the future.
I think that's huge, because the thing we noticed about New York is that the art scene and the art world there is so wide, so ample, that people could really separate themselves into very distinctive camps without ever having to interact. And I think you're right. Here we almost have to stand like shoulder to shoulder with everything else happening. And we do have a question from our friend Karis, where there are philosophies about how to represent the figure, such as Florentine or Beaux Arts. Are there philosophies that come from Latino ideas about the figure?
Carlos, you answered it.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because Latin figurative artists, after the contemporary movements, changed a lot. So we had I could talk about a little bit of Venezuelan artists in 19th century, were formed in French academies. So they were formed, but they died really young, and they didn't left a movement or a legacy of people that could probably learn from that. So figurative art movements in Latin America, it's really different from the ones that we see in Europe, and they are rich of symbolism, of culture. So if you see paintings like Diego Rivera, Siqueiros, or different artists like Guayasamín, they are figurative, but they are completely different in the approach of what we could expect to do right now. But we had people like Claudio Bravo, and I can remember of this Chilean painter that is really good too. As a philosophy, I don't know if it has been established yet, but there are roots that we could probably find in each country that they represent the identity of each country, and I think those would be very interesting thing for us as teachers to investigate, to see if we can find a point in the middle. But that's a really deep, interesting question.
Yeah, and that's something too. You know, my mom being from Cuba, it would get very, very complicated because there's so much censorship of artwork coming from there. You know, like the state, if you're an artist in Cuba, it's because the state has selected you or permitted you. So, you know, it's not a very fair process of who is allowed to express themselves versus who is not. And it's interesting too, because, you know, again, it goes back to like you were saying, Carlos, everything in Latin America is very diverse and multi-layered, because it was actually a contemporary of Ong who established one of the first art academies in Havana. So you have this 18th century French neoclassical tradition kind of taking root in Havana. And I don't know how that has evolved, especially since 1959 in the Communist Revolution. You know, I think there's a lot of voices, at least in that particular country, that are oppressed. So again, the advantage of Miami is you have a lot of Cuban artists there who don't have to worry about, are you going to be imprisoned? Is one of your family members going to disappear if you make a painting that's critical of the government? So again, that might be another layer to Florida's importance, because you have a lot of people from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, who are able to come and start over again here. So that would be a really fascinating project to chart that evolution and see kind of where it spreads out like a spider web, depending on certain points in history. So that would be...
Yeah, and you know, that would be very important for us to, in the process of finding an identity as an institution, because each institution has its own way of teaching, its own approach. And I believe all these cultural layers that Latin American communities have will impact a lot the way that we teach. There are a lot of communities that have the tendency to draw, others to paint in different manners. We will still have to get deep into that subject, and I would love to probably go back to that question a few years in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And even just on a smaller level, like our students love Café Bustelo. So I don't know if we carry forward if I carry forward any specific Cuban drawing tradition, but at least culturally we share, el cafecito. So short-term solution, between now and those years, Carlos, where you have more concrete data that you can assess, we'll do a coffee study. So, I'm always thinking about coffee. I'm always thinking about coffee.
Yeah, I know Carlos is too. So.
But I think that too is. But I think that's an advantage too, a more cultural openness that you see in Florida, because as people know, studying art is very intimidating. You have to put yourself in a very vulnerable position. We have people who come in and say to us all the time, oh, I don't want you to see what I'm working on. I'm scared to show you what I'm doing. And it's like, hey, it's taken us a lot of time, a lot of student loan payments, a lot of practice. Hopefully at least just by having, just a more comfortable environment that, that you tend to find in more Hispanic communities. I really hope that people feel comfortable enough to let their guard down, which is so necessary to overcoming certain challenges in your technical progression with art to work with us more, or at least we give them all the Cuban coffee in the world, and then they get really, and then they're very, very productive. So
I think the students, somebody that wants to study figurative art or figure or whatever, I think it's very brave. I think it's very brave to go and give that step. Mm-hmm. So it's normal that they are afraid, they are scared. I mean, I was scared the first days, the first time that I went to my class, and I was scared of doing, looking like a stupid or something. And this is normal. So, but anybody that takes the first step and says, okay, I'm going to study this, I'm going to study drawing, is very brave, because it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like learning Chinese. I mean, it's like learning another language. You have to take so many things into consideration. And when you think that you more or less have juggled with a little bit of everything, then comes bread with anatomy.
Yeah, I know. I've never really sculpted, and I've been married to him. So
So
you never finish, right?
No, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah. And Teresa, you were. I do have to say that you were really a great sport, letting me cut your sculpture in half this past winter to show you what I thought the cross section of the rib cage should be. That was very.
That was terrible.
Yeah, that's why I don't do sculpture. I don't think I could emotionally handle that. And I've been drawing for a while.
It was excellent, Red. It was a great experience. It was excellent. I loved it. And after all this coronavirus ends and everything, we really hope to have you back.
Okay.
In class.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think that MIFA is a really fantastic place. And as we've talked about, I think that Miami is a really exciting place to be working right now, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of and connected to this community. I think it's a really fantastic place to be. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah. I think that about our teachers, about our instructors, is that they are so understanding. I mean, I find them that they are very patient. And when you're a student and you are so like stressed about this, you need to have like a loving hand, very patient, loving hand to show you, you know, the way. So it's very important to nurture the student. It's not just to go and teach. It's very important to, you know, nurture. Okay, you are doing this good, but you need to correct this, and you know this. I think I'm very proud to say that our instructors are very, very human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you need when you're a student and you are all full of doubt and you are full of, you know, you're stressed, full of doubts, and you need somebody to really support you. Like you need a second father, so you need somebody to guide you.
Yeah. Now, I was wondering, just selfishly, one of my other questions is if you guys could tell us a little bit about, you know, if you have a lot of time to do your own work right now and what you're currently working on. So, Carlos, can you tell us a bit about the paintings that we see in the background behind you?
I don't know if you can hear me well. I've been losing the connection through Zoom. I don't know what's happening, but I can hear you now. I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, okay. This is, well, it's since probably a year ago, I started thinking on going to my own solo show, just preparing my own solo show. So what you see in my bag is basically a group of paintings that will be part of that solo show. And it's an investigation that I'm doing that has to do a lot with the conscious, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. And it's basically an allegorical representation of some aspects of the personality. So I will be getting deeper into it, but I'm still at the beginning. I've been working in 4 or 5 paintings. I would hope to do at least 15. And it's gonna take me probably a year and a half or 2 years to finish.
Wow, very ambitious, very cool, very cool. And really quick, before we cut to Teresa, we do have a comment from someone you guys know. Richard Kershaw says, he says, hello to my friends Teresa, Carlos, Lauren, and Brett. Great to see and listen to all of you. I enjoyed the discussion and look forward to seeing you all again soon. So,
thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
So much.
Yeah, and now Teresa, you have these beautiful images of palanqueras behind you. Are you still planning on continuing to make more?
Well, these are on process. They're not finished. I just, what I want to do is to have a body of work to tell a story about them, and then probably I'll move to something else. But for the time being, I want to finish maybe, like Carlos said, maybe 15 is a good number to have like a body of work that I can exhibit or, you know, or tell a story about them. Because right now I'm engaged in this, I'm engaged in, you know, in this, their story, in telling their story in something that I have since, you know, it's my experience since I was very young. My mother used to take us to Cartagena when we were very small because she grew up there. And I always look at their colorful dresses and, you know, the sweat on their faces and the skin tones. Even I was a little girl and I wasn't even thinking about painting, but all these skin tones always called my attention because they were so colorful. You could see purples, reds, and so it's fascinating to me. So I just want to maybe finish this and maybe move to something else. But for now, I'm engaged in this, let's say, collection or body of work.
Yeah, very cool. One of the things that we were going to do in about mid-April was we were going to go to the Kennedy Space Center, again on the more northerly east coast of Florida, because I've started kind of getting obsessed with astronauts and things. So again, we were kind of like, we were like, the figure in Florida is so easy given my own change and recent work, and we can go to the Space Center and check it out. Obviously, that has not happened yet. I don't think it will happen for a while. But again, it speaks to a lot of the resources that we have here. So it is 8:23, and we have another few minutes. If there's any more questions that people would like to ask for you guys, or anything else you guys want to share in the meantime that we should know about your own work, about MIFA, whatever you've got in your head. Más cafecito, un poquito de vino.
Carlos?
No, well, I wanted to thank you guys for this opportunity to talk a little bit about our ideas and our projects. I believe that together we are trying to build something that could be really important in the future. And basically, we are committed with education, not only as an artist, but as educators. We all, and in Teresa's behalf as an entrepreneur, on building a platform for culture, bringing a platform for different aspects of art, and to meet together in a space to build a new student, because probably one of the philosophies that we have is that art should be of the five senses, and painters should share time with musicians and poets and dancers, because at the end that will reflect on each of every one of our own work. And I believe that in the future we might see something completely different in terms of works of art being developed in that space.
That's fascinating. Fascinating.
All right.
Very cool. Teresa, any last words?
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing this opportunity together, and I admire you guys. You're trying to, to do a lot of things in this pandemic. You have not been quiet. I mean, you are moving. I congratulate you for that.
Oh, thanks, Teresa.
There will be very good things to come, and I think we will come out of this pandemic all different, with a knowledge and a different view, even our own art and the way we learn. So it will be very beneficial for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about MIFA and all the programs that we can bring in the future. When the pandemic started, we were talking. I mean, we were planning on many things. So let's see how we can reconnect or recover. We were talking about a music program. We were talking about theater, and we hope that we can in a few years we can put something nice together for the community. That's our dream, to be like a spot, a media spot for all kind of artists, and it doesn't have to be only visual arts, and all kind of arts.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So I think what we'll do is we'll end the feed on YouTube, but we're going to keep the Zoom meeting going for a little bit because I want to toast you guys properly. But to everyone watching, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for any potential tech issues and staying with us throughout all of those. And of course, many, many thanks to Teresa and Carlos for joining us. I hope you guys are just as excited about the future of art here in the Sunshine State as I am after talking to them. So thanks. Yes. So thanks again and take care. And that's a wrap.
All right.
Thank you. Remember dessert when we see you, Brett. After dessert. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.